Welcome, everyone. As you are trickling in from the waiting room, thank you for joining us. Welcome to our Business of Arboriculture series. If you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, let us know where you're from. It's always nice to see where our friends joining us are from. So feel free to drop into the chat and say hello and let us know where you're from. I'm Jessie McClellan. For those of you that don't know me, I am the Executive Director of the Georgia Arborist Association. This is the Business of Arboriculture series. Welcome, Brian from Gunnersville, Alabama. Also another person from Alabama. Hopefully not everyone here's from Alabama today. Villa Rica, Georgia, welcome. Atlanta, hey Mark, how are you? Chattanooga, Tennessee, hey Matt, good to see you. This is the, I think, fourth or fifth in this series of Business of Arboriculture. For those of you who have not joined us for the previous sessions, this is a partnership between Auburn University, the U.S. Forest Service, Georgia Arborist Association, Warnell School of Forestry, and Raising Trees. The series is designed to help new arboriculture businesses set up their business for success. If you missed the previous sessions of this webinar, they are available on the Georgia Arborist Association YouTube channel. I'll also send out a recording of this to anyone who registered through our website, and I'll include a link to the YouTube channel so you can tune in for the previous sessions. It will continue next month. We do have several more in the series. Next month is going to be managing a productive workforce. And then after that, we have scalable fleet management solutions and safety from scratch, building a safety program. Lots of exciting topics in this series, so hopefully you'll continue to join us. Welcome from all those from Florida and from Cartersville, from Virginia and Texas and California. Wow, we've got people from all over. This is awesome. So it's really nice to see everyone from all over the country joining us. Today's topic is going to be taxes and business setup, and we are joined by Patrick Larson. One more quick note of housekeeping before I introduce our speaker. There is one CEU tied to this event, so I will be dropping actually two notes of housekeeping. I'll be dropping a link in the chat at the very end of the session for you to fill out a survey. And in that survey, it will ask you for your ISA certification number, and that will be submitted to the ISA for CEU credit if you need it. And also, if you have questions while we are going through the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. However, we'll be holding the Q&A until the end of Patrick's presentation. So you can drop them as they come up, but we'll be answering them at the end to let him get through all of his presentation before the questions. So feel free to ask them, but we're going to hold the questions until the end. If you have comments, feel free to put those in the webinar chat and talk amongst yourselves while the presentation is going on. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Patrick Larson is the Vegetation and Utility Inspection Manager at Inland Power and Light in Eastern Washington, and also a small business owner. And I'll let him do a more detailed introduction for himself. Welcome, Patrick. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jessie, and thanks to everyone else for joining. It's great to see so many people from across the country here. So as Jessie mentioned, right now I'm in Spokane, Washington, at my office at Inland Power and Light. But a little bit about myself before we jump into the presentation. I grew up in a family of utility line workers, and it was kind of just the family business to get into it. So I knew at some point I wanted to be involved, but I also loved arboriculture and forestry and trees. So as I worked throughout some of the utility work that I was doing, I was fortunate enough to travel and make some money to be able to eventually open up my own tree care service with a very good friend of mine. And it started out just sort of a weekend warrior gig. And eventually we kind of grew it into what it is now. We're doing really well. We're able to work with our whole community in Sandpoint, Idaho, where I live. It's a growing but fairly small community, and Um, I'm kind of crazy in the fact that I still have my you know Monday through Friday job with Inland Power as a vegetation manager, but I love to go out on the weekends and my time off and work with our crews and work with our my partner, our other owner, and get into the work. But I strictly, for the most part, in the business, manage the business side of things. And when we first got into this about 2014, there was a lot to learn. We'd worked for some tree services. We'd been around a lot of them, and we thought, well, this probably won't be that hard to start up. But I was in for it initially, just trying to understand everything I had to do to start this business. So today, my goal is to kind of share some of my experience. I don't think what I'm gonna share, even in the slideshow, is anything that all of you can't go out and find and learn. I thought I would share some tips here on the slideshow, but my experience with it as well. So I hope that this is something that everybody that's thinking about starting up something can take something away from and put it into practice to kind of build your business as you go forward. Today we'll talk about some tax considerations and just business startup in general. When we decided we wanted to start this, like I mentioned, we were a sort of a weekend warrior. But the very first few things we knew is, as we've been out and around, we've seen a lot of tree services that weren't really, I guess, what I would call legitimate. There was folks that were, they might have a bucket truck, or they've got their ropes and climbing gear and a saw, and they're able to go out, but they weren't insured, they weren't licensed in the cities or states that they were working in, and there was some concerns with that. So the first decision we made as a group was to go out and get legitimate. So that takes some digging into and finding out whichever state you want to organize in, looking up your Secretary of State. They have different names in each state. In Idaho, that's Secretary of State. But you have to decide pretty early on what you're going to want to do with your business as far as how you're structured. And I'll dive into that a little bit. And it's good to kind of work all this out on paper or however you want to do it before you jump in and start, because it's sort of a step-by-step process. And I'm sure you go online and kind of see, how to start a business. It'll help explain it, but it's always good to have a good plan. I think initially we were excited about it, and what I learned is we didn't have the best plan. We had an idea for a business name and we knew what we were going to do, but we didn't sit down and take the time to write up a business plan, what our overall goals and objectives were. Certainly didn't even consider a vision, mission, and values until much later on. At that time, it was just him and I and a couple of trucks and some saws. So as you go into your business, it might start out small, but as you continue to grow, it's something you want to always consider, how you're going to structure and what you're going to do. So moving into the presentation, today we're going to kind of talk about some understanding basic tax obligations, deductions, and credits for tree care businesses, and then your record keeping and reporting requirements. Going in right away, just understanding basic tax obligations is a huge burden for a business owner. Right away, you have to decide, do I want to hire a tax person? Are you a little short on money? Is it something that you would like to try to do yourself? Originally, that's the way we did it. I decided I was going to take on that responsibility of filing our business taxes and working through all of that. Right out of the gate, I did a lot of research, obviously reading tax law, which is not exciting at all, and can be pretty in-depth and pretty intimidating, honestly. I was fortunate to have some really good friends that have done some bookkeeping and accounting, and I was able to ask a lot of questions and get a lot of answers. So I encourage anyone, always reach out and ask people questions. Before we end today, I'll certainly provide my contact information if anybody wants it. But researching what you need to do for a business and your tax obligation, thinking about if you're a single owner, if you have partners like I do, how you're going to structure that. It's a lot of digging and understanding, what it entails and what it's going to take. So I recommend what I ended up doing is taking a lot of courses through a lot of different cities and states offer free courses through departments of labor and Department of Commerce to go and you can kind of read the menu of what they have available and start attending some of those and getting the literature that you need. That was super helpful to me. I'm certainly not an accountant by trade. Thankfully, with previous work, I got a lot of management trainings and a lot of business school type trainings that definitely helped me and I think gave me a leg up. But when you get into this originally, it's overwhelming. So I just recommend to everybody reach out to the states and local governments and find those courses that you can take for free. Twice a year now, I go down to Boise, Idaho, right at the Capitol, and sit in on what's going to happen on the state level for taxes. I get to ask my questions directly there, which is super helpful for me. Um, most of the states do that, so you can jump in and do those, and it is a cost, and it's things you have to consider and plan around, but it's really beneficial in the long run. Your deductions and things for your tree care business is it's another challenge that you have to overcome. And when I spoke to a lot of pretty newer business owners or people that start a business and they're sort of going, but they're sort of not. And I think there's a lot of thoughts, as far as, oh, if you just start a business, you can write everything off, and you can write a lot of things off, but it doesn't free you of any tax obligations that a lot of people think that you can get out of it. So it's really important. Obviously, you want your filings to be correct. Nobody likes an audit, that's for sure. And understanding those obligations and your deductions and credits are something that's going to just help you right out of the gate when you start. Because from day one, when you start doing work and you start billing work, you have to keep those records and you have to know how to report it toward the end of the year. So we'll kind of chat a little bit. I'll share some more experience with you. Understanding your basic tax obligations and your structure for your business. So that's the time to really sit down if you're going to have a partner or if you're going to do it yourself and decide what is right for you and your business. There's a lot of information out there that you can read about and a lot of people share. I mean, we live in the technology era, right, where you can go on and read so many threads from people. And I encourage everybody to do that because getting different perspectives everywhere will help you set your business up to where it's going to work right for you. You have your options of sole proprietorship and LLC. Your LLCs, that's your limited liability protections. That keeps your business separate from your personal. That's something that I certainly considered and what we ended up implementing as far as our structure went. And then if you're a partnership or are you a corporation or are you a single owner, how are you going to structure those? In partnerships like I have, there's two of us, we're 50-50 partners. We share profits, responsibilities, obligations, and the tax burdens. So for others, it might not work that way. Maybe you have a 60-40, an 80-20. It really doesn't matter, but understanding what that means when you build your business. And when you file for your employee identification number, with the Social Security Administration, that's where you're going to have to decide this. So it's good to have it ahead of time because it's not necessarily the easiest to change once you do it. It's you have to reach back out to them and fill out another form and explain what's happening. So if you can try to set it up originally and stick with it, that's great. Sometimes your situation changes and you have to, and you'll have to go through that extra hurdle to change your obligation. But it's really important at the end of the year when you're filing your taxes to make sure you know what you're filed as, and whether you're a partnership, a corporation, an LLC, and you can't just at the end of the year decide, well, I think I'm going to file this way instead because of my profit and loss, and however you really can't do that. So knowing your partnership or corporation status is very vital to your filings. And each of these filings affect your tax deadlines as well. With LLCs and partnerships, we don't necessarily pay tax until the end of the year. We have to report that income, and our tax return for the business is due, a month earlier than just your normal April, 16th or 17th tax day taxes. So getting that in on time so that you're not facing fees and penalties is important. So knowing your structure and when you have to file, and whether you have to file quarterly, monthly payments to the IRS is things you would want to look at as well. And you'll see these numbers are reversed, and that's somewhat on purpose. Obviously, state where we're at, state income tax, that can vary. Every state has a little bit different rules, regulations, around that. Some states don't tax as much, some others do. But looking into your state taxes is a big piece of the business. The federal taxes are obviously very important. Both are, but every state is a little bit different. Every state can be a little bit challenging with taxes. For Idaho, for example, I can easily file my federal tax information for my business online, where Idaho State, I can't do it. If I use a tax software like TurboTax or whatever software you end up doing, you have to still file that by paper, mailing it in, and it can be a little challenging. So learning that ahead of time, so it's not a surprise, when it comes down to crunch time and tax day and you're trying to hurry up and file, looking into those state requirements along with your federal will only help you be more successful and ensure that you don't face penalties that can be costly to your business. We'll get into deductions a little bit, and then we'll kind of go back a little bit more into those filings. But deductions, obviously, for your business are going to vary. It depends on how big you're planning on growing and what you're going to be buying. Equipment, vehicle expenses, obviously, tree care businesses, especially, there's a lot of cost that goes into that. If you're buying bucket trucks or specialized equipment and your chainsaws and chippers and all of that. And then your labor and hiring costs. If you're going to actually have full-time employees out there, there's a lot of costs there. Obviously, wages is one, your payroll taxes and your workers' comp insurance and just regular business insurance. And then deciding if you want to be an employer that provides a retirement or an employee stock ownership program. Those are all things that are looked at before you file for your business. Hopefully, some of the stuff you can kind of figure out as you go. Maybe you'll start out small and decide to build up bigger. But all of these costs feed into your tax consideration at the end of the year. And knowing how to file those, whether, whatever line item you're going to file it under, are things that you're going to have to learn or maybe pay somebody to do for you. And if I went back and did it again, I think what I would do is probably, if I could come up with the funds, I would have hired somebody to help me with my business taxes originally and try to be a part of it with them the first filing or first couple of years, and learning exactly what got broken down, because it was a challenge, and I had to spend at least a couple months I was prepping before even filing taxes, just to make sure that I had everything where it needed to be and where it was going to go. Picking your software, if you're going to file using a TurboTax or another business type tax, it can be really helpful. And there's options now that you can get live support if you pay a little extra. But overall, you still need to know where all of this is going to end up. And that being able to do that means you have to keep really good books. You have to keep really good track of what you've purchased, when you purchased it, and how that's going to be depreciated. Depreciation scales are something that was a totally, foreign language to me initially. I really didn't understand them, and it took me a lot of research. So a lot of this goes back, I keep saying research and looking. I cannot stress how important and beneficial that was when I first started. Just being able to look up states rules and on what depreciation and when you buy trucks, what you can charge and what you're going to be able to write off. My partner, um, wonderful person to work with, loves the job, hates all of this back end business stuff, doesn't want to touch it if he doesn't have to. And understandably, he was a little bit under the impression that, we buy a brand new truck, it's easy to just write it off and boy, we're going to save a bunch on taxes. And that's not necessarily the case. And you can kind of get yourself in a little bit of a bind if you just operate thinking that. So I always recommend everyone do your research and understand. And hopefully you can go in there and really dig into these numbers and decide, I can afford this, I can't afford this for my business right now. Or, hey, this is going to be a stretch for me, but overall on the tax burden level, it'll benefit and it will benefit the business in the long run. Your labor and hiring costs, workers' comp is not necessarily cheap, depending on each state you're in. Idaho, for example, is roughly 50 cents on the dollar that we pay in payroll. So if I pay somebody $1, I have to pay an additional 50 cents into workers' compensation insurance. And as a business, workers' compensation is very important. You have employees out there working, and if something happens, you want to be able to take care of them. Um, it's also a legal requirement. So those are costs that definitely affect you, but can help you on your tax burden at the end of the year. So knowing where to file all of that and put that in your books is going to be helpful. There's some tax credits that arboriculture businesses can be awarded if you're able to find them. Some states might be different. Federal government has some credits. There's some green business incentives that some states are still providing to people, and in the current climate, I know things are changing a little bit as far as the green initiatives, but it's important to look into, and I think it could be beneficial for everyone. And it's just depending on the state that you're at, and it's always worth a shot trying. Maybe they're available, maybe they aren't. But if you plant some trees or help with renewable resources or doing something to benefit waterways or watersheds with trees or shrubs, those are some things that might be able to get you a tax break. And your employee tax benefits, as I mentioned, a lot of that is sort of a write-off, a tax break, and you feel it all year long. And then at the end of the year, when you go to file your taxes, that takes away from what you've made. And that's important to think about when you're doing your taxes at the end of the year. If you're a partnership or however you're going to be structured, initially you make $100,000 in the first year, but by the time you bought all your equipment and paid all of your employees and all of this, what you'll show when you report on your taxes is maybe you only actually made 40,000, and then between the different tax breaks, your business might only be taxed on 20,000 of that. So it's a complicated structure, and I wish I had the time to have gone through all of the tax rules for every state from everybody that's joining here, but unfortunately I didn't. But those are all available online. There's some pretty hefty handbooks that you have to read, and again, it's a challenge, but it's not something that can't be done. I promise you that if I was able to figure it out and make it work, and knock on wood, I have not been audited yet, that anybody on this call is going to be able to do it. Getting into record keeping and reporting requirements. This is one of the most important things when you're thinking about everything is your accurate record keeping. Setting up a structure if you're going to invoice people. There's a billion apps out there now that you can invoice directly to a customer, that once you send the invoice, you can link that with bookkeeping software that will do that for you. Or if you like to do it the manual way and you like spreadsheets or you like a ledger, that's okay too. It's just important to make sure that you're staying on top of it. Going back when we first started, it was really easy for us to jump out into a job, give a quote, win the bid, be super excited, go out and do the work. And next thing you know, we have 3 or 4 jobs that are just back to back to back. And at the end of the week, trying to sit back through and do the books and make sure you remember everything you did. And what you made. It's a difficult challenge to keep up on. So I just try to recommend to everyone always is staying on top of those books, whether it's a daily, a nightly, weekly at least. But don't let those books get so far ahead or behind that you can't keep up or you don't remember things and you're categorizing things in the wrong place. Because the more accurate your bookkeeping and your financial information is, the better off you will be come tax burden time for your business. Like I'd mentioned, there's a ton of softwares out there for record keeping and tools. It's really just a pick your price and really what's going to work for you. We utilize a different application that we're able to invoice and send quotes directly. And as I mentioned, that ties into our bookkeeping on the back end now. So it's taken a lot of burden off of myself for keeping up on those books day to day, but I still go in and look at them almost nightly. Making sure that, my partner and our employees, when we're charging fuel to credit cards and that those are being coded correctly and we're allocating those receipts and we're saving those receipts in a place that they're easily accessible if and when we have to provide proof of anything. So having a system to do that, very, very important. And best practices, just implement something. And if it's working really well, stick with it. And whether that's one single person is in charge of it, or if you have partners, you're all helping out somehow, but just making sure that you're all doing the same thing. You have a system that works and you can minimize any errors or problems that might come of it. Like I mentioned, my partner doesn't like any of this stuff, but we've implemented a system now where he goes out and does the work and he sends the quote through the app. It's super easy for him. He doesn't have to do a bunch of math in his head. He just likes to, throw the numbers in. The pricing's already all squared away. The equipment, each job is being allocated to, how much money we made, what equipment was charged to that, how many employees were on that job. So software is amazing and it can do a lot for you now. So I just recommend everyone going out and shopping the right software for your business. And then if you need to start small with a software that's a little bit smaller and a little bit cheaper, that's okay. And then as you grow or your business grows and you become more successful and you want to upgrade, absolutely upgrade. Filing requirements. We've talked a little bit and I've mentioned some things, but understanding when you need to file, where you need to file, and how to avoid those penalties. Something that's come up for myself, a few times right out of the gate. As I mentioned, there were some tax rules that I didn't necessarily know. I was scrambling to try to hurry up and get it done. And I could have just saved myself a lot of headache knowing a lot of things ahead of time. And as much research as I thought I did, and I thought I understood pretty much most of it, I definitely had more things to learn. So when I speak to folks and we talk about starting businesses and even newer tree contractors that we bring on board for the utility or other folks that I use as subcontractors on some of our private work, I make sure that I always stress this point: financial planning and your compliance and these deadlines that you could pay some really hefty fines can sink you very fast. And there's a reason I think that a lot of times these smaller businesses that first start up might operate for a year or two and then they kind of close up shop. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people get overwhelmed. So doing that research ahead of time and setting yourself up so that you won't get overwhelmed and you can continue to do the business will be helpful. And your payroll tax filings. You still have to file your information for payroll taxes. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly, depending on your states. Again, as I mentioned, and then the federal requires a certain filing. So if you use a software that does your payroll or you do the payroll and process it through the software, depending on which softwares you use, some will do it automatically for you. If you maybe pay a little extra subscription fee where you enter your payroll, you hit send, it gets direct deposited to your employee's check. And then whenever that filing requirement comes up, that payroll system just automatically files it with the federal and the states that you need to. On the other side of that, if you want to do it manually, that's just understanding when you need to file and how you're going to do that and what you need to report. With your payroll tax information, it's important to make sure that you're keeping accurate records. So if that's a timekeeping software, do you have people doing a hand timesheet? Are you clocking them in and out? However that's working, keeping track of that and figuring out in your states, what's acceptable for a business. Is it down to the minute tracking? Do they allow, 15-minute intervals, 30-minute intervals? There's a lot of companies that in other states have gotten in trouble more recently with some employees that have brought up lawsuits for time that they felt they were owed, maybe because it was a 15-minute interval timesheet where uh, it didn't keep track, and some of those lawsuits can be hefty. So we certainly don't want that. Um, so deciding a timekeeping software can help alleviate that and knowing your state's requirements. But I think a big point here is technology is helpful. I think we're all in the age now where we know that, and if I could just relay that to anyone, just rely on some of that technology, do your research, and know what works best for you. But it can be so helpful as a business owner. You have a billion things on your plate as a business owner, and if you can use the tools to help take a few of those things off and ease some of that burden, then do it. It'll benefit you, and I think we all go out there every day to do the best work we can, and we all have a reason for doing that work, whether it's family or adventures or whatever it is you like to do. We want to be able to enjoy some of those things that we're working so hard for. So some of these tools can free up some of that time for you to be able to enjoy um, doing this. And your annual tax returns, obviously we know about those. Everybody knows what tax season and when that comes. um, but it's big for businesses, and I have been doing it now for over 10 years for our business, and there isn't a single year that pops up that I feel totally confident and it's just going to be super easy, and I'm not stressed at all. I'm stressed about it every year going into tax time. um, I finally got my partners on board and with making sure that we have all of our documents ready. We're ready by almost January 1. We kind of know what we've done throughout the whole year. We're on a fiscal year that just begins January 1 and goes till December 31st. So January 1, we're almost ready to go, and we can start working on taxes, or I can start working on taxes. Um, it's a stressful time. I don't think anybody likes doing it, obviously, but getting ready for that and being ready, early on is important. Before I jump into questions, I kind of want to just summarize a few things. I went through this pretty quick, mostly because I really enjoy the opportunity to hear from people, ask questions, share experiences, scenarios. So um, I'll share a quick scenario with you all. When we started this was back early, 2013, 2014. And like I mentioned, we decided we wanted to do this on the weekends, and we got quite a few jobs early on. We were super excited about it, and it went great. And as I kept digging in and learning more and more to it, there was a point in time where I didn't know if I wanted to do it anymore. My partner, he was into it. He liked doing it. We both had our other 9 to 5 Monday through Friday jobs, and I almost quit. We almost decided to just not continue. And he had a life event come up where he decided that he wasn't super happy in his job, and we had picked up enough work at that point for him to decide if he wanted to really focus on the business and dig in full time, or keep doing the job that he wasn't very happy in with his current situation. And it took a long conversation between the both of us, and we decided that we think we can make it go. I was stressed. I didn't know if I really wanted to continue or not, but I thought I'd you know join him and do the best I could to help him out. I kept working my Monday through Friday job, and I mentioned, hey, I'll help out with the business side of things, the taxes, the insurances, and getting all of our permitting, the best I can. But I still have a regular job that I have to do, and we made it work. And being able to do that was really great, just because it set him up for a situation where he was happy at work every day again, and he was able to provide for the family that he had started. And I was happy in the current job I was in. I was happy on the back end doing some of this business bookkeeping and record keeping. It's helped me, I think, advance in my career pretty significantly. It's given me a ton of experience when I'm dealing with just different entities and agencies and speaking to people. Um, so I guess moral of that whole little scenario is times do get tough, and it can be a real challenge. And um, it takes a lot of thinking, whether you have a partner or you want to talk to your spouses or significant others or family or friends, and decide if it's something you want to power through. But I think if you're able to set everything up in a way that works good for you, um, and you're able to power through, or you think you can make it work, I think you will see the benefits long term. And I just applaud anybody that's willing to jump in and start a business. It's a challenge, but there is a pride for me in being a business owner and serving the community that I live in and that I love. I love nothing more than to see reviews from some of our clients, and participate in parades, and just being asked to go and plant a tree at a high school or an elementary school with the kids. And uh, there's just a tremendous sense of pride that I have in being able to do that. So I applaud all of you for hopping in here and listening to my spiel about taxes. I know I went through it pretty quick, but I wanted to do it quickly just so I can have some more time to hear from you and maybe answer more questions. So with that, I'll open it up to questions now, and look forward to hearing from you.
We did have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A as you think about it. What bookkeeping software do you use, Patrick?
Yeah, so I started out initially when we first started using it, I was using the QuickBooks softwares. I transitioned to an ADP based software. It allowed me to do payroll and a lot of the other things that I wanted to do. So now I'm using an ADP product software.
That's a nice transition to the next question. What is payroll tax? Do you mean the employer share of FICA or something else?
Yes. So payroll taxes, employee share of FICA, your state taxes, obviously workers' comp insurance, that kind of falls under payroll. When you withhold taxes for your employees and um, for your federal, tax obligations that they have to pay, whatever they decide they want to, claim on their tax information. So that's all payroll taxes, and you have to keep an accurate record of those and make sure that whether it's monthly, quarterly payments are being sent for all that tax collected and what you owe as an employer as well. So it's covered under FICA, your Social Security, Medicare stuff. That's for the employee side. If you're withholding that from their checks, that has to get paid to the government. So
Do you write off the training and conferences that you attend?
I do, yes. So that goes into my training and conferences, and I do write that off. I write off the travel to a degree. I am pretty conservative. If I know of a training that I'm going to attend, and I can maybe incorporate some fun time into that, I don't always write off 100% of it. I don't feel comfortable doing that. Um, I don't know whether or not that's right or wrong necessarily. It's just my own, I guess, perception. But if I'm strictly just going somewhere, I'm driving or flying or attending a conference, that is something that I write off.
What's the most common thing you see people try to use as a deduction that's not allowed?
One of the most common things I see people try to use is deductions. Um, I don't not necessarily know that them using as a deduction is wrong, but is the equipments or vehicles that they'll buy, and not understanding that if you buy a brand new truck, let's say for example, and you get a loan for it, and you're paying a monthly payment, you can't just write off the value of that truck, the monthly payment. Usually it's an interest base. So whatever you're paying in interest is a tax write-off, but not necessarily the whole amount. So that's what I see a lot. And then I see people that buy a lot of equipment that might be too old to actually qualify for a write-off. Um, and I've seen a few folks that have gotten audited, and that kind of catches up, and it might not catch up for a few years. So um, I caution everyone when you're doing it. Just because you got away with it maybe year one doesn't mean that years 3 or 4 or 5 down the road that they won't come back. Um, so knowing the years and what qualifies as those deductions is important. But that's something that I've seen a handful of times.
Do you write off fuel expense or do you write off mileage?
We write off fuel expense for our tree care business. There's a couple of reasons we do that. Um, because we've separated all of our financial information, from personal use vehicles. We have company provided vehicles that we're using now. So we just put all of our fuel on that, with the exception of if we're using that truck for personal use. I'm going to take my, private tree service truck, and I'm going to go drive to my job at Inland Power. I'm not writing off that fuel expense. And um, if I'm going to do something, on a weekend or something, I won't write off that fuel expense for that mileage. If I'm going to do something in my own truck that's on behalf of the business, so if I'm going to do something for my tree service from my personal truck, I can claim mileage on that on my own personal tax return.
How many employees do you have full time, and are you able to work year round with the cold weather in Idaho?
So we currently have 9 full-time employees. And then I guess you could say 10 with my partner who manages most of that. And yes, we're working full time. We do a mix of work. We do obviously private tree care, pruning, um, tree service type activities. We also do a lot of smaller logging operation. We have partnerships with 3 entities throughout Bonner County, Idaho: the Kalispel tribe, um, the Bonner County itself, and another entity that we do a lot of logging work for right now. So we're pretty much logging all year round, and then we also have a little bit of a side shoot where we do a lot of snow removal services. So those folks are working all year round in some way.
Going back to the equipment, do you lease versus buy? The entire lease can be written off?
Depending on what you're doing. So sometimes leases are a little bit challenging, and lease payments, there is some write-off ability, but you can't necessarily write off the entire lease. So I encourage people to look, because different types of equipment have different rules and regulations. So if it's a vehicle, a car, a truck, that has one thing. But if you're leasing a bucket truck or equipment that is wearing out and depreciating at a super fast rate, there's other tax rules that may or may not allow you to do that. On the federal level, a lot of times with lease programs, you can write off things. On the state levels, they have a lot more tighter regulations on that. Idaho, for example, I can't write off necessarily the whole lease if I were to do that. We've bought all of our equipment. We have done loans to do it and pay those off eventually, but we don't necessarily lease, because the operation we're in, for one, if we're running a truck or a car on a lease, they don't usually last very long, to be honest with you. There's a lot of wear and tear when you're working on logging jobs and things that I don't really want to have to pay out the lease necessarily at the end of the year. So if I'm going to buy equipment, I'm just going to buy it. But that's my own personal preference.
How do you file taxes when you work out of state?
That's important. So you still always have to file your federals as a business, and then whatever your business is registered to. If you, for example, I live in Idaho. My business is registered in Idaho. I file Idaho tax. If I do business in Washington, I file a Washington business tax. I've done business in Montana, and I do the same. So you have to make sure that you're filing the appropriate taxes for each state. And each state has a little bit different corporation rules as far as filings go, but you typically still have to file for whatever state you're out of, and then wherever state your business is originating in, and then wherever states that your business actually works in. With that, too, I will mention that it's always important to know what the state rules are for business licensing. And then even within those states, if you go to operate in certain cities, they might require a license fee. So there's more to that when you even branch out of your own state or your own even little city, that you want to make sure that you're researching prior to doing business there.
We still have time for more questions. Oh, here's one. In your state, do you need a business license in each county that you work in?
No, for the work that we do with the logging operation and the tree care for Bonner County, for example, we don't need a license to operate for our tree care business or a logging business. If we venture into another county, there's some counties that actually require a business license. It's pretty quick and easy to file and get your license to work in that county or city. Um, but as far as Idaho State goes, once you filed your business filing with the Secretary of State that says, our tree service, we do this, we don't necessarily need a business license, but that's just because that's Idaho's rule for what our trade is. Other states that I've seen, Washington, for example, does require a business license. So I have a business license for Washington State that I've had to maintain.
Any other questions from the audience? Now is your time. Do you pay state sales tax or state gross receipts tax?
Because our business is in Idaho, for example, for the specific thing, because our business is a service provide, we don't have to write off a sales tax, or we don't have to charge a sales tax to somebody. It's a straight business. So if we quote $1,100 for this job, it's an $1,100 job. That's just reported as income, and we just pay on that. We don't really sell any goods or service, goods that we need to charge a state tax to or a sales tax. There are some use taxes that we have to file. For example, in a lot of our logging equipment, we use dyed diesel fuel. And so we might get a tax break at the pump, but at the end of the year, we have to report our dyed diesel usage, and then we pay a usage tax on that.
So in the chat, somebody brought up a really good point in having to pay state, county, and municipal gross tax. So, it is going to vary specifically in America. I know there's some people from other countries. It's going to vary from city to city, county to county, state to state, what you have to pay. So you have to really pay attention to the local municipal guidelines.
Absolutely. And, going down to whatever it's called in your city that you live in, whether it's city hall or maybe you have a commerce and understanding that prior to is very important.
They also said that's why I need a CPA. It is a good idea when you're first starting out to hire a CPA. And then once you maybe have the business setup, like you said, Patrick, then you may be able to take over some of the day-to-day management or year-over-year management on your own. But understanding those local codes is important. So paying the experts.
Yes.
This
Like I
person,
mentioned, if I could go back, I would have done that.
yeah, permitting fees paid by the clients. Again, that's not really a sale of an item. I'm not. Question was there.
Right. So I think I might be on track with with what they're saying. And for us, for example, if we're going to remove a tree in the city of Sandpoint and we have to pay for the permit to be able to do that, that gets built into our bid. So we actually pay for the permit. The client pays it as part of the invoice. So in that case, we aren't filing that necessarily as a sales tax portion, but that's just the way we've structured it for Idaho State. Now, other states might not allow that. Idaho and City of Sandpoint, they do. So again, that just kind of bills into our fee. That's a cost of doing business, cost of good, however we want to write it off. But that's the way we've always, approached it. And then for the logging operations, we don't necessarily even pay for the permitting. It would be whoever our client is that we're doing it for, because ours are larger. So it's the Kalispel tribe, they're doing their own thing, and the other Bonner County is doing theirs. So they're covering their own permit fees, and then we're just strictly doing the work for them. And we work out a deal with a lot of the organizations of, depending on the board footage that we're hauling out, we take a cut of that.
I'm going to do my best to understand this question. So correct me if I'm wrong. When you are bookkeeping, do you ID everything with your coding, or do you ID everything based on the dollar amount?
I ID everything. Make sure I get this right, but I think I ID all of my stuff by what category it goes under. If it's fuel, it has its own, fuels, and if it's a repair, I have a repairs and maintenance category. It's really based on how your overall bookkeeping is structured. But I categorize everything by whatever that type of expense is, and then I have set up the software now to have a basic rule for most things, that for fuel, we have fuel cards specifically, so they can't be used for anything other than fuel. So I don't have to worry that somebody's going to go into the gas station and maybe it sees a Conoco charge and puts it under fuel when it should be under meals, for example. But I identify everything by category. There's some tricky things to that when it comes to people are buying maybe tools or things at maybe your local hardware store or whatever you have, wherever you are, North 40, to fix something. It can be challenging to know necessarily where exactly that goes. And there might be a split. Some of those charges might go under two different categories. So again, with that, I use, with the ADP software, we're able to link those cards directly to that. And whoever's charging can categorize those expenses basically real time. They snap a picture of the receipt that's saved in the vault. They can categorize, 50% of this receipt goes towards tools, 50% goes towards maybe oil, for example.
We do have time for one or two more questions. Let's see. I'm planning on starting a PHC deep root feeding lintel pruning. It will only be me. Maybe. Oh, sorry. I'm just reading comments now. if anybody has any questions, okay. He says, do I have an insight on what insurance I would need to look into? I'm in Texas. So we did actually have one of our previous business webinars was on insurance specifically. So I encourage you to go to our YouTube and look at the series and find the one on insurance, because that may help answer some of your questions on insurance specifically.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll throw in on that with insurance. What the route we originally took is, um, like I should have done with the CPA stuff, is hiring a CPA. We went to an insurance broker, explained our business model, what we were going to do, and um, they were great to work with to help us determine our amounts of coverage that we needed, what we were going to do, and we still utilize the same broker that we used then when we started, and uh, I mean they've become a really good friend now at this point. So if you can find a solid broker, maybe that a lot of people recommend, or look in your local forums to see if somebody has a broker that they've recommended or used, I think that's super helpful, just because they'll guide you the right way. And um, most of them are all pretty honest, and there's a little bit of a fee and you might pay a little bit more, but um, it's worth it.
Somebody asked for the link to the YouTube, and I will drop that in the chat if you give me just a few minutes to grab that link. In the meantime, there was a question. Do you review the profitability of each individual project to review correct pricing? And I'd like to also mention that we did one of the webinars was on job costing. So I encourage you to go and review that. And again, I'll drop the link in the chat, but if you wanted to answer that as well, Patrick.
Yeah, I absolutely review the profitability. We build each job, ideally with our system to have a certain profitability and covering our margins just in general. And sometimes it doesn't always work, right? You come in under, you maybe didn't make as much money, but I certainly review every single job for review profitability, make sure that the numbers were right. And um, if we didn't do so well, we look at why and what we could do better next time to try to be more profitable.
What is your insurance underwriter?
Our insurance underwriter is through it's through Accord, or so also West, or not Accord, but Western World Insurance Company. So that's who our underwriter is in our out of Idaho. It's a local outfit that our broker is Guardian Insurance Northwest. But
Um, how well do the employees adapt to the technology?
thankfully, they've adapted really well. We've had a couple employees obviously come and go, move on to bigger and better things. Um, there was a couple that didn't necessarily adapt super great, but most all of them have adapted very well, and it makes it really nice, especially on come payday, when they're able to log into the app and their deposits right there. They can see what they were paid, what their taxes were, and there's not one of them that doesn't know how to use that. That's for sure. And then with the invoicing and quote apps, that's made it so easy now with the iPad that uh, it doesn't bother any of them to use it, honestly. So we, newer employees, when we hire, we have an onboarding session and we show how to use this stuff, and then it's just constantly being brought up as we're doing our day-to-day business and trying to train folks how to use things. And if I roll out a new change or a new procedure to something, we do a lot of training on that to try to make them comfortable with using it.
How many on your staff are ISA certified arborists? I like that question.
6. So 6 of 9. There's a few folks that have a little bit more time remaining before they're able to sit for the exam, but they're working on it. And we've been really, really fortunate to get some folks with previous experience. And to be honest, the majority of our staff actually came from another tree service that ended up having to shut down. And so they were already certified. We've sent folks through the certification, 3 or 4 employees through ourselves, but yeah, we're very fortunate that the majority are.
That's an impressive ratio.
Yeah.
By technology, do you mean your employees all use the ADP tool?
Yeah, so ADP has an app for them specifically that they can log in and see their information. Um, so yeah, the ADP tool for their pay information and all of our, I shouldn't say all of our employees, but all of our crew leads, if they're split up on different jobs, have access to our quoting and invoicing apps so that they can make sure that that's getting done appropriately. And then additionally, the crew leads that have their credit cards have the access to the through the ADP application to be able to um, file their charges appropriately.
Do you use any electric handheld equipment rather than gasoline operated?
We do, yes. So yeah, we use some electric chainsaws. We have a mix of both. We haven't necessarily been brand specific or loyal to one brand, but yes, we use some electric saws, and they've worked out pretty nice, honestly.
Do you have all W-2 employees or any 1099?
So we have all W-2 employees. We have 1099 contractors, and those are typically our log truck drivers. They own their own, and we 1099 those contractors based on their loads that they haul.
What other ISA certifications do your employees have?
We have a couple other folks that are track qualified. We have some folks that are interested in the municipal, um, but we've stayed away from the utility specialist just because we're not in that private care. We're not doing the utility work. Two reasons why. We both have done it for so long. My partner and I. He doesn't want to do it, and I'm in the utility trade with the utility, and I don't want to give off a conflict of interest in that sense. So we stay out of the utility trade. So none of our folks have done that. We certainly wouldn't hold it against them if they want to do it or they want to go for it. But and there's one employee in particular that's actively pursuing the board certified master arborist. We're encouraging him, and we'll help him out as much as we can.
We are running out of time. There was one more question in the chat. And if you have any last minute questions, feel free to drop them in. I put the link for the CEU credit in the chat. So if you're attending and need ISA CEUs, please make sure you fill out that form and I will submit to the ISA. It typically takes about 3 to 4 weeks for that to show up on your dashboard, but I will submit that for you if you fill out that form. And one last question, are you currently using any AI tech?
We aren't currently using any. We actually have a meeting here pretty soon to look at some drone technologies that would be very, very helpful for us when we're looking at new logging plots. But we haven't utilized it yet. So we're going to do some piloting, hopefully, and see how it works. I would share it, but I don't know. We sort of have an NDA because it's a little bit of a newer firm. But so we haven't dove a lot into the AI, but we're looking at it.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Patrick. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise with our community. Please tune in next month. We have managing a productive workforce. And if you have missed any of the past presentations, again, they're on our YouTube channel. I'll send out a link to that in an email with a link to this video as well, in case you'd like to review what we discussed today. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next month on April 24th for the next in this series. Thank you so much, Patrick. Have a wonderful day and good luck with all the storm work.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day and good luck.
Thanks.